Janie's life-changing baked goods.
Yeah.
Where did that name come from?
Yeah, so it's funny because a lot of people, before they know about the business, are like, "Wow, that's a bold statement," kind of like snarkily, like, "Wow, like you really think a lot about yourself." I do think our cookies are life changing,
But it's authentic and
but
accurate.
it's right, and so like the cookies are good, but also like this changed my life. This completely changed my life. Like the woman I am today is 100% because I got sober and because of how sobriety has enabled me to grow this business and grow up in this business.
Welcome to Second Act Stories. Every 2 weeks, we tell the story of a courageous individual pursuing a more rewarding life in a second act. I'm your host, Andy Levine.
And at Andy's side, I'm Scott Merritt this week. So today's profile, Andy, is with a probably younger second act. Tell us a little bit about 36-year-old Janie Deegan.
So Janie grew up in New York City, and in her early 20s, she developed an alcohol and drug addiction and eventually found herself living on the streets and in a bunch of different halfway houses. Now, baking cakes and pies were always an important part of her life, and it's sort of what got her back on her feet. And she eventually created Janie's life-changing baked goods, which has emerged as an incredibly successful new business.
Now, I understand that there are these pie crust cookies that she sells. Tell me about those.
Yeah, they are fantastic. It's like a tiny little pie. You can eat it in 2 or 3 bites, and they are just delicious.
Very, very cool. Here's Janie's second act story.
So I grew up on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. I'm a New Yorker, born and raised. I came from a family of theatrical designers. And so my mom and dad are both my mom is a costume and set designer, and my dad is a set and lighting designer. So they always worked together, and they worked from home.
I understand you had an early love of baking.
My grandma was a big cook and a baker, and so we would sort of just have these huge family dinners where everybody would sort of pitch in. And from a really young age, my mom and dad and grandparents encouraged helping out in the kitchen and just experimenting. We used to do this thing. My mom let us do this thing called butterscotch lava, which her and her siblings had been able to do, which is basically as a 5-year-old, you go into the kitchen and you're allowed to mix whatever you want.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, like ketchup and, I don't know, baking soda and hamburger meat, or no, maybe not that because that's a little dangerous, but you get the idea, sugar. And it's the idea that we could try it and see sort of like what works and what doesn't work and what's disgusting and what's delicious. I loved to cook. I liked to bake too, but just I loved it's so creative, it's so artistic, it's so freeing. And so just from a young age, like I really, really loved it.
Like many people, Janie began experimenting with alcohol and drugs in high school.
From the first time I picked up a drink, like I felt relief from a young age. Like as my earliest memories are just of extreme anxiety and just feeling like I did not belong. I did not fit in. I just remember like just extreme anxiety over the silliest, smallest things and really obsessing over small things. And when I had my first drink at 15 or so, it just was like such a relief because all that like noise sort of calmed down and I just felt funnier and prettier and I just felt more like myself.
Janie headed to the University of Michigan and majored in theater performance. With her newfound freedom, her drinking increased. But it wasn't until her college graduation that things really spiraled out of control.
I spent the summer in Ann Arbor after college, and it was this idea of freedom. There was no what's next. Like I had no idea what was next. And I was 21 at that point, so I could obtain alcohol easily. That summer was a lot more drinking. Like it was like drinking every day and being around, like really finding friends who were drinking every day and seeking out people who wanted to drink in the same way I did.
I want to make sure I understand the backstory of this.
Yeah.
You get home from college.
Yes.
You clearly have a drinking problem.
Right.
Did it become quickly apparent to your family that this was a problem?
I was not a kid anymore. I was in 22, 23 and living at home. And so that's obviously, as a parent, very stressful. And so just from everybody, friends and family, like my life got smaller and smaller. And what I heard over and over again was the sentiment, we love you so much, but it hurts to be around you.
Mm-hmm.
And so eventually I was no longer allowed to live at home. And I moved into an apartment that I couldn't afford and couldn't hold down a job, and then had no place to live and went to another rehab out of desperation. I didn't want to be there, and nobody was going to fight for me if I wasn't going to fight for myself. And so then it led to a period of about 9 months where I was going between government-run three-quarter houses and sleeping on the subway and ending up in the hospital literally hundreds of times that year.
Wow.
It would be a great night if I'd wake up in the hospital. It would be like, okay, I'm safe. I was homeless. I was filled with fear.
So I gather from some of the things I've read about you that baking was sort of important in getting you back on your feet.
Yeah.
Just describe that.
Sure. So when I finally did get sober, I was living in this three-quarter house in the Bronx, and it was disgusting and insane. And I managed really quickly to get a job as a superintendent, and the job didn't pay anything, but it came with this little tiny weird apartment in the East Village. And I took care of 3 buildings in the East Village and took out trash every morning at like 5 a.m. and did all the jobs a super would do. And I had this kitchen, this weird kitchen with a shower in the kitchen. And so I would show up every day and do my job. I was just so filled with shame at where I had been and like who I had hurt and what I had done and what I looked like, all those things. I was just paralyzed with shame, fear, and self-hatred. And baking was something that I had loved as a kid, and I needed an artistic outlet. I've always needed an artistic outlet. I wasn't going to work in theater and film, and so I wasn't going to find my artistic outlet in that way. And so baking was very meditative, and my life was so out of control. And baking, more than cooking, is like you have to follow the steps, right? It's if you want to get to the end result and you want the end result to be good, you have to follow the steps in the correct order. And so it was like a way for me to be in control. But then I also get to connect with people because I can now take my baked goods and kind of hide behind them and bring them somewhere.
So Janie was getting her life together. And that's when an older friend, Robin Schechter, did something that moved her in a new and positive direction.
Janie was a good friend. She was baking as a hobby, and she brought her baked goods to parties and gatherings that we had, and I thought they were really outstanding. I always thought there were bigger things that she would be doing. Anyway, I thought maybe 2 things. One, if I ordered the cake, that she might be inspired to sell some of her goods. And that secondly, that that I would have a great cake for my birthday. It was a big birthday.
How did the cake work out for your party?
Oh, the cake was amazing because she made it exactly to my specifications. She did the custard filling. She made it really pretty, more than I thought. I think I have a picture somewhere. And yeah, it was delicious. And I do remember saying to my son, I said, Janie is going to be huge.
Yes, the birthday cake was a hit. And that was a catalyst for her new business.
I ended up making a cake for her. And at the time, I could not put a price on it because I did not know. And I was like, cakes have no value. And she gave me some money that I thought was a huge amount of money at the time. And Thanksgiving was right after. And I just remember turning to my boyfriend at the time one morning, and I loved baking pies for Thanksgiving and like having these modern twists on traditional pies. And I remember saying to him, is it crazy if I try to sell pies for Thanksgiving? And gave him all the reasons why it was crazy. I gave him a million excuses to be like, yes, Janie, that's crazy. Like, just shut it down. And he was like, no, that's a great idea. And so through word of mouth and like made a flimsy Facebook page and just like all these different ways that people spread the word that I was selling pies for Thanksgiving. And I ended up selling, I remember thinking like if I sell one pie, if one person buys a pie, it'll be a success. And I sold like probably 60 or 70 pies that Thanksgiving. And I would say over 50% were people I had never met.
For her next step, Janie enrolled in a 10-week course run by a New York City nonprofit called Hot Bread Kitchen.
They had a class going on called Food Business Boot Camp or something. And so I paid, I think it was $500. And it seemed like such a lot of money at the time, like almost a week's pay. I did pay the money and I took the class, and it was the building blocks of starting a food business in New York City. And I remember learning like I need a food handler's license. That blew my mind. I had no idea what that was. And so like, how do I overcome that? And what an LLC is, or an S Corp or a C Corp. I'd never heard these words. Like I remember looking up, people kept saying entrepreneur. I kind of knew what that word meant, but I like had to go look it up. I remember previously thinking that people who were making cakes or cookies were my competitors, and I should not look at them. I should not talk to them. And then in this class, I sort of learned that that's not true, that this industry is so generous. And really like the class was of so much value, but the most value was in the network. And it was about that time during that class, I developed the pie crust cookie, which is almost 100% of what we sell right now. And what the pie crust cookie is a disc of pie crust, very flaky, and then a little bit of filling. We make dozens of different flavors, and then streusel, like crumb topping to hold it all together, and to say it's just sort of like that perfectly proportioned bite of a pie and just like a little handheld cookie. And I invented this cookie and brought it to that class, and everybody was like, this is crazy. This is amazing. Stop making cakes.
How did this idea come to you?
My boyfriend at the time would come up with these crazy ideas for me, like a scone cupcake. And he kept talking about a pie crust cookie. And I'd be like, what is that? It actually sounds good. And he'd be like, I have no idea what it is, but that sounds delicious, doesn't it? And so I started thinking for his birthday one year, what is a pie crust cookie? What would a pie crust cookie be to me? And so that's how it was born.
This was a differentiated product.
I remember like Googling it and not finding anything on Google, and people being like, nobody makes anything like this.
The pie crust cookie was a huge hit for Janie and her new company. Food personality Andrew Zimmern wrote, "No joke, these are the best cookies I've tasted in years. Ridiculously delicious." Janie's life-changing baked goods.
Yeah.
Where did that name come from?
Yeah, so it's funny because a lot of people, before they know about the business, are like, wow, that's a bold statement. Kind of like snarkily, like, wow, like you really think a lot about yourself. I do think our cookies are life-changing.
But it's authentic and
But
accurate.
it's right. And so like the cookies are good, but also like this changed my life. This completely changed my life. Like the woman I am today is 100% because I got sober and because of how sobriety has enabled me to grow this business and grow up in this business.
Let's go to your open door hiring policy.
Sure.
So how many do you employ right now?
I think it's 16 right now, or
Okay.
15.
Okay. Describe to us the open door hiring policy.
The person you show up for as the interview is the person we're looking at. We're not doing background checks. We ask for a resume, but we're not really using the resume as a sole reason for hiring. We do a lot of talk about teamwork and how this is like a family and we're all supporting each other. And so we've had formerly incarcerated employees. We've had homeless employees. We've had people who are just like completely switching their career and just want an opportunity in the food industry where they think that they possibly want to pursue a career for the rest of their lives. And so it's been really beautiful to see just how people blossom when they
I'll give it a chance.
yeah, when they're given a chance.
Do you see a piece of yourself in many of these employees?
I do. It's been amazing to see how someone will come shy and timid or unsure about everything and then just really blossom and step up as a leader or a team member. I cannot believe how much they have grown in every way. And so that's been really beautiful to see.
From a financial perspective, has this been a profitable venture for you?
It has, yeah. It has.
Okay.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to someone who maybe is thinking about starting their own business but is just really scared and having trouble pulling the trigger?
Sure. So I talk about fear all the time. If I'm not doing something because I'm afraid of it, I make myself do it anyway. And that's been life-changing for me. So I would say that if you are thinking about starting a business, start doing the research and really get yourself in a community of other people who are trying to start a business. Community is everything in this aspect. So it helps you from not being scared of starting this venture, and it helps with actual growth, and it helps with opportunity.
You've gone from being homeless with a serious drug problem to being a really successful entrepreneur.
Yeah.
What would you want our audience to know about drug addiction?
It is a mental illness. I think that a lot of times I speak to family members who have someone who's an addict, and they're like, why can't they stop? They're losing their kids. Why can't they stop? They're almost dying. Why can't they stop? And it's not that simple. It doesn't work that way. We have to reach our own spiritual bottom. And so, but there's always hope. Don't quit before the miracle was really important to me. It can happen for you too.
When Janie came to the interview, she brought cookies for my entire staff, and they lasted for about 5 minutes. Everyone loved them. And then about 2 weeks later, my wife and I were having a dinner party, and I decided that we would have Janie's life-changing pie crust cookies for dessert. And they all went. They are really amazing cookies, Scott.
I can't wait to try them, and I know you're going to send me some. But where can everybody else go?
So you can order them online from janiebakes.com. That's janiebakes.com. They come in pecan, apple, chocolate, cherry, and my personal favorite, triple berry. Or if you're in New York City, you can visit one of her 2 stores, soon to be 3 stores.
That is really interesting because I know most of these companies where somebody has a baking operation, they start in somebody's kitchen. And they kind of make it to the farmer's market circuit. But what do you think was the catalyst that carried Janie over the hump from the farmer's market circuit to this New York City real estate is not cheap, to this retail success in the world's greatest city?
2 things come to mind, Scott. Number 1, she has a differentiated product. The pie crust cookie, no one else is making them. It's an amazing product. Once you taste them, and I will send you some cookies, you will understand what's going on here. So that's number 1. Number 2, when she became sober, she was determined to become a success. And this is what she focused her life on. She put incredible amount of sweat equity into this, and she just made sure it worked, and she's been enormously successful.
And she's helping others get successful too. And this is one of my favorite parts of this story. She described her open door hiring policy. How do you think that kind of changed the course of her company's trajectory?
In New York City, there are a lot of very capable, good people who were either formerly incarcerated or have a drug or an alcohol problem. Janie just basically says, when you show up, whoever you are that day, I don't care what happened the year before, the 10 years before, I don't care about your past. I'm going to hire whoever I see that day. And I think her staff are just so appreciative of the opportunity that it becomes a real family, and they work really hard, and it's been a very successful way to find good people.
I love an inspirational story that also gets me a little bit emotional, so forgive me.
You'll feel even more emotional when you try the cookies.
I'm sure I will. I can't wait. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, Andy and I want you to please leave a favorable review. It definitely helps other people find us, and we always appreciate the support.
And if you know someone you think we should profile, please let us know. Just go to the Nominate a Guest box on our homepage at secondactstories.org. We hope you'll keep listening. There are more Second Act Stories just around the corner.